One more way to control animation is to use the dope sheet. Now, this allows us to control attribute by attribute our animation, but it doesn't allow us to do graph editing. So it sits somewhere between the timeline and the graph editor. So let's go ahead and select our rocket and go into Windows Animation Editor's dope sheet. And when I do, it brings up this interface. Now, this probably looks a little bit familiar, and it's actually connected to the graph editor. So if we go over here, we see two buttons here. One is for the tracks editor, and the other is for the graph editor. So if I click on this, I can go directly into the graph editor. So I can hop between the two, which will make animation editing a lot easier. And then if I click here, I can go back into the dope sheet. Now, I do have another option here, and that's called the tracks editor. And what this does is allow us to manipulate animation in layers. So if you're doing something like motion capture or something like that. But we're actually just going to work with the dope sheet right now. So if I have my object selected, you'll see that I have a couple of lines here. I have a dope sheet summary and one for the actual object I've selected, rocket body. And as I scroll through the timeline, notice how the keys on my timeline match the keys in the dope sheet. And so in some ways, this is very similar to the timeline. So if I want, I can marquee select keys and then go into my move tool and middle click and drag, and I can retime my animation. This is very similar to what you can do on the timeline. But the really nice thing about the dope sheet is that it allows me to dig deeper. So if I hit the plus sign here, you can see that I can actually go down on a per attribute basis. So if I select translate and Y, I can middle click and drag on just those keys and retime it. So I can do one key or multiple keys. So if I want to, I can retime my entire animation an attribute at a time. So this is kind of a middle ground between what we can do on the time slider and what we can do in the graph editor. It gives you a much broader view of the animation, makes it a little bit faster to manipulate things, but it doesn't give you as much control over the in-betweens that the graph editor will do. So I'm sure that you'll find the dope sheet very useful for manipulating your animation.